Support for WUWM podcast comes from Hop Harvest and Vine and Good Harvest Market in Milwaukee, part of One Destination, combining farm-to-table dining, local craft beers, and organic groceries under one roof. More at goodharvestmarket.com.
From 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR, this is Lake Effect. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Today we'll speak with a Journal Sentinel reporter who visited western Wisconsin, where ICE operations are taking place.
What has been the case in western Wisconsin is that business owners have had trouble filling shifts if people are too afraid to come to work.
Then we'll learn how visiting saunas can be a relaxing way to get through Wisconsin winters.
It can be just like a quiet time to focus inward and connect with yourself. But I think people are going there because it gets them off their phones and connected with other people and with themselves.
Plus, in a new Bubbler Talk, we'll learn about a statue in Milwaukee's Cathedral Square that pays tribute to immigrant mothers. All that's coming up on Lake Effect. This is Lake Effect from 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Thanks for joining us today. While news about ICE's actions in the Twin Cities has slowed recently, operations continue. Those operations have also spilled over the state's border into western Wisconsin. Over the past few months, agents have been detaining people and, in some cases, children. To date, this is the most widespread ICE operation in Wisconsin. Last month, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel reporter Sophie Carson spent time around the area talking with community members about ICE's presence and how the community is responding. She joins WUWM's Jimmy Gutierrez to share what she found along the Wisconsin-Minnesota border.
Sophie, welcome back from your reporting trip to western Wisconsin. You visited a bunch of spots, but one town in particular called Baldwin with a population just over 4,000, which dubs itself the biggest little town in Wisconsin. When you visited, it sounded like it was almost a ghost town, though.
The streets were quite empty. We were there in the middle of a weekday, so in general, it would be fairly empty. But the thing that was notable was just how many apartment buildings and homes had been vacated. We followed this woman, Denise Flaherty, around. She's a volunteer who knows a lot about the community, and she was really able to point out just how many places were empty now that immigrants had fled because of immigration enforcement.
I would encourage everyone to read your piece and the profile you do on Denise, who she's like a rapid response team onto herself when it comes to immigrants and taking care of the folks in her community. And her background a little bit, which you got into, is she's a retiree from corporate America. She doesn't speak any Spanish. In the past, it doesn't sound like she'd advocated for immigrant rights before. So can you tell me a little bit about Denise and the work she's doing and how she got started doing this?
Definitely. She told me before a year or two ago, she never even thought about the issue of immigration, which is sort of interesting. She lived in the Twin Cities. Now she lives on a farm about 40 miles east of the Twin Cities outside Baldwin, but she really got connected to a couple families through a food donation program, and she took it from there and started seeing the effects of immigration enforcement and the sort of fear around that on so many families. You know, people too scared to leave their homes, kids not going to school, people needing rides to work, and just the challenges that come with not being okay with driving places in a small town that obviously doesn't have any public transportation, doesn't have very many social services, doesn't have an immigration advocacy organization. So she's taken it on herself. And when I sort of asked her about why she was doing this, she just basically said that it was, how could she not? You know, she saw what was going on, and how could she not help? So I thought that was sort of interesting.
The other thing that you get into with her is the network that they've built up in just a couple months' time and the challenges of doing it in like a rural space in rural western Wisconsin, which doesn't have the same population or resources as, say, Twin Cities or Chicago or Milwaukee. So what were the challenges, particularly in a place like Baldwin or that area, that they have to navigate on a regular basis?
Yeah, well, one difference from what's going on in the Twin Cities is that the population density is much higher in the Twin Cities. So there's people sort of rushing out of their homes to take videos of ICE agents, But in Baldwin, it's Denise and some other volunteers driving around, messaging on apps saying someone was spotted here or this person needs help. And so it's mostly in Baldwin and Hudson, like retirees, stay-at-home moms, and then people sort of driving around after work to help people and gather donations, things like that.
In a companion piece, you do talk about Hudson and some of the very shocking ways I think that agents are detaining immigrants and undocumented folks. There's the video that you all linked to of the 12-year-old girl getting picked up while they were grocery shopping. Her and her family were grocery shopping.
Shame on you. Shame.
So Hudson is maybe, one of the biggest towns in the St. Croix area, in this area in western Wisconsin. And the police chief, Jeff Williams, said that the department would continue to work with ICE, even after what's been happening within the area. And Hudson's mayor, Rich O'Connor, recently shut down public comments on public concerns about sharing information with ICE. What do we know about what's happening with ICE and ICE operations in Wisconsin currently?
Basically, in western Wisconsin, it seems that, police are continuing to say they're going to work with ICE. There are not, beyond western Wisconsin, sort of major citywide operations, sort of roving operations, picking up anyone on the street. That's not necessarily the case in Milwaukee, or Madison, although we do, of course, every day have several reports of people getting picked up by ICE agents. But in general, western Wisconsin is sort of this unique case because it is next to the Twin Cities. And in the advocates' view, in the Hudson area, one of the reasons Hudson and Baldwin are so targeted by ICE is that the agents are staying in hotels in those two towns. They're sort of just in the area already. They can sort of drive around and easily arrest individuals, although, of course, this is what the advocates say, and ICE did not say it would comment on any operations.
Thinking of these small towns in rural spaces who this could be a large part of their economy, I'm curious, what does this mean, having ICE and sustained ICE operations in places like this that may be a little bit more reliant on immigrant labor?
It's definitely a good question and something I think remains a major concern for this area in terms of the economy. I mean, across rural Wisconsin, immigrants make up a huge portion of the dairy workers. Manufacturing plants rely on workers and staffing to do undesirable jobs like overnight shifts, holiday shifts, dirty jobs like cleaning the stalls on dairy farms. And what has been the case in western Wisconsin is that business owners have had trouble filling shifts if people are too afraid to come to work. And then otherwise they've been trying to schedule rides to get workers to their plants. But it is sort of a major concern economically for that region.
There's one person that you wrote about, and his name's Dario, owns a grocery store. And I think his story, if you don't mind sharing, kind of really gets to the community need to have a Mexican grocery store, a culturally relevant grocery store, and kind of the growth that he was going through, and then also how now his entire business operation is in a state of limbo, and he doesn't know what's going to happen next. So can you tell us about Dario?
Yeah, definitely. So he's sort of an interesting case. He's been in the community of Baldwin a very long time, and he just said it's such a small town. He never, ever expected this to happen in Baldwin. But he has video of two people being arrested outside his shop, and that has created a lot of fear. Before ICE came to the Twin Cities in western Wisconsin, his business was doing so well that he was starting to build a restaurant in the back of his grocery store. And when I visited, there's drills going on in the background, there's hammering. They were a week away from opening, and the store was empty, and they keep the front door locked to let people in who do venture out. But he really is unsure about what to do next, because he wants to open the restaurant. He basically said, there's no going back. I mean, I've invested all this money. I've built the restaurant. But he doesn't know, even if he does open the restaurant, unlocks the doors to let in customers if they could be maybe, say, ICE agents in hiding. There's this really pervasive fear, even for someone like him who's lived in the community for 20 years, that a real sense of uncertainty about what's next.
Thinking about all the reporting that you did and how you've connected with employers and following Denise and, multiple towns and kind of like what they're seeing, this was not a hop, skip, and jump away from you. Like, this was a pretty ambitious trip that you took out there to kind of document what was happening. Now that you're back in Milwaukee and the Twin Cities have their reporters, but they have their hands full on reporting on this, who is going to be following up with people like Denise and what's happening in Hudson and Baldwin in rural western Wisconsin? How do those stories continue to get told, or do we just not hear about what happens next?
I'd like to continue telling those stories. I think the challenge of being a news reporter in a rural area is that there's a lot to cover, and a lot of it is difficult to uncover because immigrant families are so afraid to speak in that area. They're just very nervous. So writing the story was an interesting challenge because I didn't want to sort of violate anyone's privacy, and I didn't want to make it so that ICE would follow any of the people I spoke to, But Denise, she said, ICE already knows who she is, which is sort of an interesting challenge. But it continues to be a story. I mean, in the Twin Cities area, I think there's still several hundred ICE agents working. And in western Wisconsin, they continue to say that people are being picked up and that the ICE agents are in the area. And I think the next story is really about, like, detention, habeas corpus petitions, and whether people are going to be released from custody and what the lasting impact on those towns is, because there is so much movement away from those towns to elsewhere in Wisconsin, elsewhere in the country, even back to people's home countries.
Sophie Carson has been reporting on ICE operations in western Wisconsin for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. She spoke about it with WUWM's Jimmy Gutierrez. Need some flexibility for when you listen? You can listen to Lake Effect on demand. Find it as a podcast wherever you like to listen to download and enjoy on the go. Coming up, we'll tell you how Ozaukee County is working to reduce flooding. But first, we'll explore Wisconsin's sauna culture. Keep listening to Lake Effect on WUWM. You're listening to Lake Effect on Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Wisconsin is experiencing a surge in sauna culture. New businesses are popping up in parks, on shorelines, and in backyards. But heat bathing has been a part of the upper Midwest culture for over a century, and it's largely thanks to the Finnish immigrants who settled along Lake Superior. Bridget Fogarty is a reporter with the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and she recently visited a few saunas to learn more about this tradition. She joins Lake Effect's Excret Nunez to share why more people are sweating through Wisconsin winters together.
Before we dive into unraveling sauna culture, I'm curious how this story came about in the first place. Like, how did you decide this was a story worth telling?
So in my day job, I report on the west suburbs, Wauwatosa, Brookfield, Elm Grove. And I had never been in a sauna until 2025. And my semi-obsession started with my cousins. They live in Chicago, and they're always kind of just trying to find a different adventure to do in the winter. And they had seen a lot of these public urban sauna businesses popping up. So as I was thinking about more of these businesses, seeing them pop up, I just thought is this a trend or is this more of like, what is the history behind all this? And that idea quickly unraveled into talking to all these different business owners around the state. And from those conversations, just like realizing that this was a larger story, more of these businesses are bringing this long observed tradition of heat bathing that's always been here in Wisconsin for the last like over a century. It's been here from Finnish immigrants. So these new business owners, in the last 5 years have been creating businesses that are introducing people to this.
Yeah, and it turned out to be this really nice feature of like a collection of the history, the community, and all of the sauna places people can check out. And particularly what I found interesting about your article is that like sitting in saunas isn't just an activity people enjoy here, like you mentioned, like it's deeply a part of Wisconsin culture. I was wondering if you could tell me more about that history.
So for Nordic cultures, the sauna has been an important space, and Wisconsin's roots with it really date back to the late 1800s. So one of the people, as I was trying to understand the roots of this in Wisconsin, Michael Nordskog, he's the author of the book The Opposite of Cold, The Northwoods Finnish Sauna Tradition. And he talked me through how saunas are often the first building that the early Finnish immigrants in Wisconsin and Minnesota along Lake Superior, those were often the first buildings that they built on their farmsteads. Also the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, where these Finnish American communities continued the tradition. Another thing he said about the history of it is that sauna was the place that people would bathe on Saturday nights before Sunday church, or maybe on Wednesday nights. It was like a place where people would give birth. It's a place where people would get through illness, a place where people would meet for important conversations. And that was really cool to hear about because that tradition changed and shifted over generations, but people still up north continue to have saunas, whether it's, a pop-up barrel sauna that they've built in their backyard. And then some of these business owners might not have a direct connection to that like up north tradition, but they went away to Finland or Norway and they visited these public bathhouses and thought, why don't we have this in Wisconsin? And that's what prompted them to build that here. So it's cool that it's both something that's been deeply rooted in Wisconsin culture for a long time, but also some people had to kind of go away and come back to build their business.
That's an incredible story. And I know that you spoke to a handful of people for this story. And kind of on the note of what you were touching on, like the tradition of how you use saunas has changed through generations. What did you find out brings people today to sweat it out together, basically?
Yeah. So I was able to first visit Kiln in Door County in October. And then from there, that sort of spiraled, whether to my editor's excitement or disdain, that spiraled into me visiting 3 other sauna businesses. So I visited Hot Spell Sauna that's on McKinley Marina. I visited Heat Haven Sauna Park in Wauwatosa's Hart Park. I also connected with The Hive. They're a sort of more like nomadic pop-up sauna, and I joined them at Clode Park. So I got to see all sorts of different people who this is like almost their religion. They're doing this every week. I also got to then talk to people who were trying it for the first time. And so I think that some of the resounding reasons why people are flocking to these businesses is the wellness aspect of how it makes their body and their mind feel. I also talk to people who really are choosing to go to these spaces because it's an alternative to sitting at the bar for, an hour and drinking alcohol. And that also speaks to the community aspect, I think. People are meeting each other in saunas. I think after the pandemic, we had a couple years of isolation and kind of that emerging from there. It's like, how do you meet people? How do you meet new friends? How do you stay connected with your neighbors? It also can be just like a quiet time to like focus inward and connect with yourself. But I think people are going there because it gets them off their phones and connected with other people and with themselves.
So it sounds like saunas are a third space for people. I was wondering, what did you enjoy most about visiting saunas?
Yeah, I think that I slowly became more entranced with going to them because I just love that it's a way to be outside in Wisconsin winter and really enjoy the beautiful place that we live. For me, I just feel great. I sleep really well afterwards, and it clears my mind. It's fun that family introduced me to it in the first place because I feel more connected. It's something that I can do with my cousins or I've done with my mom and her sisters. And so it's just become a really bright spot in what can be harder winters.
I'm Lake Effect's Grant Nunez speaking with Bridget Fogarty, a reporter with the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, about her recent story on Wisconsin's sauna culture. Well, Bridget, we're about to visit a sauna together, but before we head out, I was wondering, do you have any advice for first-timers like myself on sauna decorum or tips on what to bring?
So make sure to bring a towel, maybe bring two, one if you're going to dry off and go in the lake, one to sit on while you're in the sauna. I would also wear a swimsuit or some athletic clothes that you don't mind sweating in. There might be chatter, there might be light conversation in there, but you can also take that time to just be quiet and sit with yourself. Bring some water. I would suggest, drinking water beforehand. Another thing you could bring is sort of like a shower shoe, so flip-flops or Crocs. But, once you've got all of that gear, just going with an open mind, taking a deep breath, listening to your body. The people who all work there, too, will really guide you through the experience.
Well, Bridget, I am so excited to go check out a sauna with you. I really love chatting, but how about we head out and try a sauna together?
Let's do it.
All right, we're here at the McKinley Marina. Bridget, what's the weather out like?
It's possibly the most dreary day we could have chosen to do this. It's really foggy, raining outside. We're parked right by the water at the boat launch where the saunas are, and we can barely see across the lake. But we're still going to do it.
Yeah, Bridget said it's rain or shine.
No choice.
I'm feeling a little nervous, but super excited. I mean, something you mentioned earlier, Bridget, was what else could you possibly do on a day like this, right? And the sauna is a good thing to do right now.
Yeah, I feel like if we're really going to try to embrace Wisconsin winter, that includes fake spring. We're going to get outside. We're going to enjoy ourselves. And I don't know, I think you're going to like it.
All right, let's do this thing. Oh my God.
Yes.
I'm wearing a bathing suit and it's so cold outside. And I'm walking into the sauna.
Awesome.
I've never done anything like this in my life.
You can see the steam coming off people's bodies when they walk out, which is kind of crazy. All right, so we'll head in. Here we go, into the sauna.
It's so nice.
Yeah, it's like a warm hug. So this is the stove. We've got a couple logs on it. The fire's going. And the rocks on top, we could pour some water and get some steam.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
I'm surprised that I'm not shaking. I'm not shivering.
Yeah, how does it feel to be outside after
It
being
feels
in...
good.
It's 180 degrees in there.
Yeah, I probably went up after we put steam on it.
Yeah. So when you step out of the sauna, a key part of the hour and 15-minute session is getting the contrast therapy of going into the cold. Just like we experienced, walking out of the sauna, you just kind of feel refreshed even being in the outdoor air. But some people take it a step further and they'll walk down this boat launch and they'll walk right into the water. The water's about, 34 degrees, someone just told us. So some people dunk, like someone just did now. but you really just try to breathe through being in the cold. And there's a whole bunch of different research that shows potential benefits of doing a cold plunge and doing the hot and cold back and forth. But most people just say it makes them feel good.
I don't know if I'm brave enough to step my toes into the water, but I think we're choosing the rain today to give us the little cool off moment.
And we get to go back into the sauna, warm up again, and then try it again, and maybe we'll feel different. Yeah. So we're just kind of building that threshold of like, okay, I can stay outside a little longer. I mean, I think I see steam coming off your body. At least I see like my breath right now. So we can head back inside if you want.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm proud of us.
Oh, me too.
We're back in the sauna. It's nice and warm. True part of the Finnish sauna experience is what is known as loilu. And for all the Finns out there, they can help me better pronounce it. But loilu is the act of pouring the water onto the rocks. And it's also the experience of the water becoming steam. So we're going to do that now. Excret, how do you feel? We just did like an hour and 15 minutes of going in and out of the sauna.
I feel so much better than I thought I would. I feel really relaxed. I'm not cold. I was shaking. I was shivering the very first round that we did. It just felt so nice to feel the rain on my skin and feeling the heat in through my nose, on my lips, on my toes. It was like an intense feeling. I gotta be honest, I was pretty nervous going into this experience because I felt like I was breaking like cultural rules in my family to like not go outside after being in the water. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'm glad I broke my family's rules for a little bit. And I could totally see myself doing this again. I think it's really meditative.
Yeah. Well, I'll come back with you. It was so fun to do it with you. And, you know, although we didn't get that cold plunge experience, we got a really unique experience. Like, even right now, we're standing outside, right next to the water. The wind is coming in, the rain's still coming down, but it's really nice to cool down this way. I don't know. I feel like it'll push us into the rest of the day with ease. This is just the start. I feel really refreshed.
Yeah, I'm excited already to do it again. So thanks, Bridget, for inviting me.
Thank you. This has been so fun.
Yay.
Yay. Let's warm up.
Bridget Fogarty is the West Suburbs reporter for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. She spoke with Lake Effect's Excret Nunez. Bridget and Excret both visited Hot Spell Sauna along the McKinley Marina together. Still to come, we'll learn about a statue in Milwaukee that pays tribute to immigrant mothers and a new bubbler talk. But first, we'll head on up to Ozaukee County to learn about some projects that aim to better manage floodwater. That's next on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. This is Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Climate change is leading to more extreme and unpredictable weather, including heavy rainstorms. Communities around southeast Wisconsin are trying to find ways to better manage stormwater and reduce flooding. WUWM environmental reporter Susan Bentz takes us to Ozaukee County to learn about two green infrastructure projects that could help tackle this problem.
I met Ozaukee County's Planning and Parks Director, Andrew Struck, at Vermont Park.
Yeah, we're at the southern edge of Ozaukee County, right on Lake Michigan.
The views are dazzling. Lake Michigan glistens beyond the bluff hugging the shore. We head north along a wooded path. Water puddles beneath our feet.
We have bluff-top wetlands just 100 yards from the edge of the bluff. They're super important habitat. We have some very unique species of salamander that use these wetlands.
Struck points to 30 acres of restoration to the west.
We've restored native prairie, woodlands, and wetlands.
The restoration is about more than enticing salamanders to the park. It's designed to move water away from the bluff. Why?
The bluff is very, very dynamic. Slumps, slides, etc.
Natural forces like ice in the winter or strong currents buffeting the shore contribute to erosion, but so does the stretch of wetland 100 yards beyond the bluff. Struck says that's because of what's happening beneath the wetland surface. He compares it to a layer cake.
You have these big layers of clay, your main cake material, and then you have little sand lenses that are like the kind of the cream filling or whatever, right, running through the layer cake, and then you have another chunk of clay, and then another sand lens.
So while the wetland holds water for a long time, when it does percolate down to the sandy layer,
those sand lenses take the water out towards the bluff. That's where you get some of that contribution to erosion.
And here's where the human impact comes in.
Vermont, while it's 63 acres, a fairly large park, it's built up on all sides. So residential development to the north.
The wetland naturally drains to the north.
And it used to drain out north of the property into a ravine. That was cut off.
Struck describes what resulted as ponding. Basically, the water builds up.
We were getting ponding at the far north end here.
And with more frequent and intense rainstorms, ponding has intensified.
Like 5 feet of depth of water, very close to the house foundation.
The 30-acre restoration is turning what was mowed grass into a series of wetlands that flow into prairie. So the rainwater has a place to go.
We now take all that water that was draining along this linear bluff-top wetland, and instead of it going out through the ravine where it historically wanted to go, we're now directing it west.
Away from the fragile lakeshore bluffs and away from park neighbors' basements. Struck says the massive green infrastructure system is designed to handle a 500-year storm.
Try and visualize this with me.
A 15-minute drive northwest, Struck stands at the highest point of Mequon Park. The 18-hole golf course dominates its 240 acres.
So the clubhouse is kind of at the highest point, and then the parking lot kind of tapers down.
For decades, rainwater rocketed off the lot and the road system that led to it. Struck says there was a lot of pavement.
This was all road. So basically between us at the fence, all the way to where you see the mowed lawn for the grass, that was all pavement. So it would run down the pavement, it would run down both sides into the ditch lines and go.
Carrying pollutants on its path. To shift the trajectory, crews reconfigured the asphalt-covered space, removing nearly half the pavement. Struck says that made way for a deep stormwater wetland.
This kind of long, narrow shape, it looks a little bit like a banana.
Its deep-rooted native plants slow the flow and help remove pollutants.
So we collect it here, and then it goes underneath the road into these two or smaller wetlands, and then it eventually goes out of both those smaller wetlands, through the woods, and then down into Mequon Creek.
We move downstream at the park's edge. The creek glistens in the sunlight.
Just shortly off the property, it enters Pigeon Creek, which is a cool cold water stream.
One of the healthier tributaries flowing into the Milwaukee River. Struck says the big bluestems, sedges, and ironweed growing in Mequon's stormwater wetland are particularly good at slowing water and removing pollutants it carries. With climate change and storms it unleashes, Struck says strategically placed green infrastructure systems are becoming increasingly important.
We're fortunate that we're still in a situation where we either have the space or we can create the space by taking out pavement. So these things are, absolutely necessary as we, move forward with managing the water.
That was WUWM's Susan Bentz reporting.
Bubbler Talk, quenching Milwaukee's thirst for knowledge.
I'm WUWM's Taryn Powell. A 6-foot-tall bronze statue of an immigrant mother with 2 children stands in Milwaukee's Cathedral Square. It's been there since 1960, and one of our Bubbler Talk listeners wanted to know more.
My name is Cletus Hasslinger, and my question is, how was the statue titled Dedicated to the Valiant Immigrant Mother, conceived and executed and placed in Milwaukee's Cathedral Square?
Hasslinger says the question came to him while he was at the park for an anti-ICE protest.
When I looked closely at the poorly lit title chiseled into the granite base of the statue, I thought, given the purpose of this rally, the speakers should be standing over here with the statue behind them and looking out over their shoulders.
Hasslinger thinks the statue is especially poignant now as the federal government cracks down on immigration. According to UW-Milwaukee art history professor Kay Wells, the immigrant mother statue was erected during a time of shifting immigration policy in the U.S. It was during the last years that the Immigration Act of 1924 was in effect. That law was replaced in 1965.
The 1924 Act is very famous for having prevented immigration from Asia and set quotas on the number of immigrants, primarily from Eastern and Southern Europe, whereas the number of immigrants from Northern Europe, especially the UK and Germany, were allowed to remain high, relatively high, compared to other countries.
The 1965 law did away with those discriminatory quotas. Wells says the immigrant mother statue was funded by a German-American citizen. To learn more about him, I talked to Michael Barrera at the Milwaukee County Historical Society.
So William George Bruce was a publisher and a civic activist here in Milwaukee who had a really prolific career in business, starting out in cigar making and then working as a clerical job for the Milwaukee Daily News and then on to the Milwaukee Sentinel as a bookkeeper and cashier. Very, very accomplished. But Immigrant Mother is really a tribute to his mother.
Her name was Apollonia Becker Bruce.
She came to Milwaukee from her native Germany at the age of 17, married at 18, had a total of 8 children, William George Bruce being the eldest, and then his mother died at the age of 38. William always regarded her as a real important guiding influence in his life. And I think, the difficulty of her life, the difficulty of his life, and, the closeness between the two of them are really key to why he wanted to memorialize her in such a way.
When William George Bruce died in 1949, he bequeathed $30,000 to the city of Milwaukee for a statue to symbolize motherhood. The immigrant mother is not a literal depiction of Bruce's mother, but a way to honor her memory. And according to an old newspaper article, he left explicit instructions for how it should look. Her head covered with a white kerchief, the ends tied under her throat, with a babe at her breast and a small child clinging to her skirt. Bruce's heirs chose renowned Croatian artist Ivan Mestrovic to sculpt Immigrant Mother. Diane Buck is an expert on outdoor sculptures in the Milwaukee area. She says Mestrovic may have also been paying homage to his mother when he made the statue.
He often used his memory of his mother as he sculpted. You can see the obvious marks of Mestrovic's hand on the bronze sculpture. That means that when he sculpted that, he did not make it completely realistic and smooth, so that you saw that where he took his hand and he was sculpting it in clay.
A 1960 Milwaukee Journal article on the unveiling of the statue says in his will, Bruce wrote, "The memory of the immigrant mother of the New World should be enshrined in the hearts of future generations as that of a ministering angel who braved the roughness and hardships of a pioneer life in order that the blessings of civilization might come to her progeny."
What have you always wanted to know about the Milwaukee area? Visit wuwm.com/bubblertalk to submit your question.
The library is more than just books, and our series with the Milwaukee Public Library called Books and Beyond showcases just that. We share resources, book recommendations, and some cool stuff you just might not know about. Today, we're exploring the Wisconsin Concert Poster Collection. It's a unique showcase of local music history in the early 1980s in and around Milwaukee. Bands like the Violent Femmes were just getting started, plus groups like Couch Flambeau, Einstein's Rice Boys, and so many others. To learn more, I met with Rare Books librarian Timothy Rush, who starts by explaining how these posters were collected.
The collection started, as a lot of our collections do, with a singular donation. So in 2002, a man named Steve Bertolis-Jeske donated to us this sizable amount of probably around 150, 160 Milwaukee concert posters, also a few that are from scattered outside of Milwaukee, Madison, that area. So we do call it the Wisconsin Concert Poster Collection. But he had a personal collection for years. He had grown up outside of Milwaukee, but his grandparents lived in Milwaukee, and he would come and visit. And when he visited, they lived just south of Brady Street, which was a hopping area for Milwaukee music and all of the venues down there. And so he would just walk up, and then he would just pull down as many concert posters as he could, and he would accumulate that over time. And he loved doing that so much that eventually, he would do it throughout his college age, et cetera. And so it just collects this very specific time period around the early 80s of all of those bands and those posters and those venues. And so it's this really nice little slice of history.
Absolutely. And the start of the collection, if we want to talk about a specific poster, it's of Dead Kennedys concert in a venue that turns out is now one of the library's branches.
Oh, yeah. So one of the things that is beautiful about the history of the venues that you see is like things like that, which is that there is this Dead Kennedys concert that takes place at Top of the Hill at the corner of Mitchell and 9th, which is exactly Mitchell Street Library now. It had previously been a department store, and then once the department store closed, it had basically lay empty for a while and then was transitioned to being a venue for a bunch of different things, including a Dead Kennedys concert. And now, many years later, we ended up getting the money and funding to renovate that space, and now it's the gorgeous Mitchell Street Library.
I love all this little tidbits of unique Milwaukee history, and you, of course, mentioned Brady Street. And Brady Street in the 80s obviously had a lot of venues, but it was also a hub for Milwaukee's counterculture scene, amongst other places on the east side. So how is that reflected in some of the bands featured in this collection here?
Oh, you see all sorts of stuff. The best thing is that these posters vary from really well-produced printed objects that we stole designs from Japan, or we found clip art of a lady from Egypt. But you also get hand-drawn. You get Sharpie written with, skeletons with mohawks and picking their nose and violent acts. The most prominent example is probably the poster we have that is for a councilman's fundraiser effort, and the poster is literally for an event called Rock Against Reaganomics, which features a little caricature of Ronald Reagan sitting at the bottom of a cliff and a bunch of people trying to push a rock off of the cliff. So there is some very marked political commentary in a lot of this, and there's a lot of fun bits of history that are captured as well.
What decade would you say is kind of most prominently featured in this collection?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is the 1980s is by far the most prominently featured. There's some that get scattered in from other periods, but 80 to 84 is the vast majority of it. When we originally digitized this collection back in 2016, 2017, under the purview of the then digitization library in Liz County, we really dived into trying to figure out information about both when these concerts were and where they were. So a lot of the information we needed to research was figuring out, okay, if we know what day of the week it is and what day it is, can we figure out what year it took place? And that's actually fairly straightforward. Even trickier was taking the venues, which didn't necessarily say where they were, and figuring out where any of these venues actually were. While a lot of them are collected around Brady Street, the venues exhibited in here are from all over. And what ended up being a really invaluable resource to researching the history of Milwaukee venues was actually the Wisconsin LGBTQ History Project. They have a history of all of the gay bars and lesbian bars and et cetera across Milwaukee in that time period. And it turns out they do a great job of listing both what they were when they were those counterculture and specialized bars, but also the other names that those venues had previously and before. And so I really couldn't find where a venue called the Lost Dutchman's Mine was. But it turns out it was also like known as the Unicorn at one point, and that allowed me to figure out and pinpoint exactly where it was, and then I could figure that out. And it was so grateful that somebody else had preserved that history so that we could track it through this.
That's one of the things that I love about just the heart of special collections. Like, one, it's usually based off of someone donating things they've collected, and we can't save history unless someone is doing that, right? Mm-hmm. And you were also showing me some posters before we started recording here, and some are just for fun of made-up bands. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Oh, yeah. So what was really fun was when we digitized this, we also had started a Flickr group at that time. It's defunct at this point, where we were trying to get members of the public to share digital images of their collections, because unsurprisingly, most people who collect posters like this don't want to donate them while they're still alive. And so they're like, but maybe I'll share images of it. And we wanted to collate that information. But it also meant that we were getting stories from folks. And we got to find out that, like, sometimes bands would just make up other bands to put on the bills because it made them laugh and it didn't matter, or it would make it sound like there was a bigger bill than it was just Sacred Order. So like one of the posters we have is, Sacred Order, and then it goes with I can't remember the second band, but the third band is just the Dairy Queens from Hell, which should clue you in that it's not a real band, but it is just really funny on this giant wall of different names. And then you start to go, wait, are all of these bands fake? And it's no, a lot of these bands with their very outrageous names were very real, and a lot of them had a lot of really great music.
And I'm thinking here, it's like this is just an indication of what marketing looked like pre-internet for bands, right? Because I feel like you go to concerts nowadays and posters aren't really as heavily featured on the merch table, right? So with the kind of zine quality of people making posters as simple or as complicated as they want it to be, what do you feel is the importance of preserving this type of history of especially local music in this unique way?
Oh, so like the other thing is that half of these bands, like I will try to research, and because this is the 80s, they don't have a web presence. You maybe get them mentioned because they showed up in the thumb notes of a Die Kreuzen or a Violent Femmes article, but a lot of these folks don't get their story really told. Interestingly enough, one of the bands that is kind of like almost, I don't want to call it a footnote, but not one of the big Milwaukee bands of the time, is actually the source of one of the donations to the collection. After we had digitized the collection, eventually folks would discover it, and one of those folks was Dan Quass, who had been the lead singer of the Sidewalks back in the 80s, and he donated his personal collection of all of his Sidewalks-related posters. And interestingly enough, he also donated all of the newspapers that had covered his band, which was the first copy of the Express that we actually had in print here at the Milwaukee Public Library. A lot of those smaller press newspapers we apparently did not collect actively at the time. We actually were going over this yesterday. We don't have the vast majority of the Crazy Shepherd. We don't have a lot of the Express in paper form. Some of it we have in microfilm, but like to have an actual Express newspaper was so nice. And it's great that we were able to get one via this venue. But yeah, these bands, both in terms of what they were singing about and the types of songs, the genres, like the really fun thing is that this collection is, unsurprisingly, a lot of punk music, but it's also a lot of new age music, which was like the other big music genre that was in Milwaukee at that time. You've got folks like Sigmund Snowpeck who show up in these posters, and while another fairly unsung hero of Milwaukee music, I mean, just recently, last year, somebody put out a 6.5-hour documentary about him entitled The Complete History of Space-Time Destination Milwaukee. And it was really interesting to discover that, because Snowpeck is one of the few bands that I was able to find and still had like this huge genre and this huge oeuvre of music that he had performed. And it was actually the one band that got me to buy an LP. I was like, oh wait, this song is great. I'm going to buy this Snowpeck LP. And sure enough, I tracked one down. And so that's the one like Milwaukee music that from this collection that made me go, I want that for my own collection.
I love that. So as you mentioned, there's kind of two individuals that donated the majority of this collection. It's also available digitally. People can make an appointment, come view it for themselves. Is this also kind of a living, breathing collection? Are you always looking for more?
Oh, absolutely. We happily would accept more donations. So mplarchives@milwaukee.gov. Give us an email. We are happy to talk to you and figure out, if you are wanting to donate posters, if you're wanting to donate your actual music, your manuscripts, the books you used to write all your lyrics in. We love to preserve that information for future public, and so that people can learn and enjoy and see those bits that maybe didn't make, the encyclopedia, but that's still part of Milwaukee's important history. But yeah, also everything available via appointment. Again, that same email, let us know. We take appointments during the week so that you can come in and see this stuff. And we're a public library collection. It's not locked away in a vault. It's here to enrich you, the Milwaukee public.
Timothy Rush is a rare books librarian at the Milwaukee Public Library. We explore the Wisconsin Concert Poster Collection in the Rare Books Room, and you can see photos and find more information at wuwm.com. And that wraps up Lake Effect for today. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. If you've missed any of Lake Effect this week, you can find all of our conversations at wuwm.com. If you'd like to take the show on the go, just download the Lake Effect podcast wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. Tomorrow on Lake Effect, we'll bring you some of our top stories of the week, including reactions from Iranian students studying in Milwaukee about the war in their home country. Plus, we'll tell you what's at stake in the upcoming state Supreme Court race. Thank you so much for joining us today, right here on listener-supported 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.